What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds DFS, and in today's video we're going to do a first look at the PrizePicks NBA board for February 24th. It's 11:30 a.m. here on the East Coast, so just keep in mind that the projections you see in today's video are subject to change, and they typically do throughout the day as news breaks and things like that. If you missed yesterday's big news, I sat down and did an interview with PrizePicks community manager Addy, and it went really well. So if you haven't seen that yet, go over to the official PrizePicks YouTube channel or check them out on Twitter or any of their other social media accounts, and you should see a link there from yesterday, which has the interview. It was about a 20-minute interview. I think it went really well. It allowed me to tell my story a little bit so that you guys can kind of get a better idea of who I am, my background, where I came from, where I want to go, and all the fun that we've been having building this community together. So very cool interview. Stop what you're doing. Go watch that. Come back here. I'll be here for you guys. Definitely an interview that you don't want to miss. But anyway, if this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we talk all things single player daily fantasy sports. So that includes PrizePicks, the Monkey Knife Fight. We'll eventually start getting into the other ones like Thrive Fantasy and all that, as well as those continue to grow. And speaking of growth, we're growing really fast too, and we're on our way to our first 600 subscribers, so definitely subscribe if you haven't yet. Turn on notifications, smash the heck out of the like button for me. It really helps me out, and if you feel like it, leave a comment and share this video. It helps us go so much further as a community. So without further ado, we've got another pretty good size NBA slate to talk about. Looking at about 9 games on today's NBA slate. So the first thing we've got to do is get some injury news out of the way. Starting at the very top here, Kemba Walker, Boston Celtics, doubtful. Might be rested on a back-to-back. Gordon Hayward, Charlotte Hornets, questionable with a right hand contusion. Andre Drummond continues to be purposely sat by the Cleveland Cavaliers as they look for a trade partner. And that's really benefited Jared Allen lately, who had a big game last night. Now, DeMarcus Cousins is out. He doesn't have a team right now. He is a free agent. He was waived by the Houston Rockets. Victor Oladipo is questionable with a right foot strain. LaMarcus Aldridge is questionable with a hip. DeMar DeRozan, San Antonio Spurs, out due to personal reasons. Kyle Lowry, Toronto Raptors, questionable with a left thumb sprain. Steven Adams, New Orleans Pelicans, probable. He looks like he'll make his return to the lineup. Anthony Davis continues to be out for the Los Angeles Lakers. John Collins is questionable with a concussion. So big news there. Maybe that's a bump up to the likes of Clint Capella and Trey Young and maybe some of these other guys. Devontae Graham, Charlotte Hornets, is out with a knee. Keldon Johnson, San Antonio Spurs, out due to COVID protocol. Dennis Schroeder, Los Angeles Lakers, out due to COVID protocol. Tyler Herro, questionable with a hip contusion. Cam Reddish, Atlanta Hawks, questionable with an Achilles injury. DeLon Wright, Detroit Pistons, out with a groin. Blake Griffin continues to be sat due to a team choice. Maybe they're looking to trade Blake. Rudy Gay, San Antonio Spurs, out due to COVID protocol. Derek White, San Antonio Spurs, out due to COVID protocol. Eric Gordon, Houston Rockets, questionable with right heel soreness. And Goran Dragic, Miami Heat, questionable with a left ankle sprain. So some pretty notable news and names to definitely worry about tonight. Sounds like the Houston Rockets are going to be pretty short-handed without DeMarcus Cousins on the team any longer. Eric Gordon potentially sitting out. Victor Oladipo sounds like he's probably going to be out. So it's the John Wall show. John Wall, Jayshawn Tate, and whoever else they can find to play basketball for their franchise. But anyway, let's move ahead here and we'll talk the fantasy projections and start breaking down some of these names. We got a pretty big slate, as I mentioned before, and it all starts at 7:40 p.m. over on PrizePicks. So not a normal 7 or 7:10 p.m. starting time on PrizePicks. It's going to be 7:40 tonight. So we'll start things off with Steph Curry, who is projected at 51, facing the Indiana Pacers. And as I mentioned, this game tips off at 7:40 p.m. Now, last night, Steph Curry was a little questionable as the previous game against the Hornets. He suffered, I don't know, some sort of last-minute illness or wasn't feeling good. Who knows? Maybe he had bubble guts. Have no idea. But anyway, he came back last night to the Golden State Warriors lineup and ended up having a pretty good game. I think every site that I saw had Steph Curry under, and I believe he said Not so fast. I'm going to go over. Now, his projection today is at 47.57. So 47.57 would put him under by quite a bit versus that 51 on PrizePicks. Let's take a look at his recent games and see what he's been up to here. So if we go back to his fifth game against Brooklyn, not a good game at all. 34.1 points. 46.4 against Cleveland. Also, good game, but not good enough for tonight's projection. 52.9 would have put him over. 52.9 would have put him over. He missed this game, as I mentioned, against Charlotte. And then last night, 57.2. Now, I know the Knicks are pretty bad at guarding opposing guards, so I thought, hey, this could be a good spot for Steph Curry. But, you know, with every site having him pretty much under his projection of 51 yesterday, you know, it seemed like under was the way to go. But you know, he's still Steph Curry at the end of the day, and it's hard for me to click the under on any of these superstars, whether it be Steph Curry, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, you name it. I never feel totally and completely comfortable clicking the under in full game formats on these guys, but you know, sometimes it's the move. I mean, the other night, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, clicking the under on them worked out, so you just never know. Tonight against Indiana, he's expected to play 35 minutes. He is a combo guard. Now, the Indiana Pacers, they allow 49.96 fantasy points per game to combo guards, meaning they don't guard combo guards very well. So this could be a plus situation for Steph Curry here, as this average points allowed by Indiana is higher than his projection on RotoGrinders. Not quite as high as his projection on PrizePicks, but again, this is shaping up to be a good spot for Steph Curry. He should have a very good game. It is a back-to-back, which I'm not all too worried about, being that he did sit out a couple games ago against Charlotte. You know, a back-to-back for him, he should still be fresh. No real concerns from me there. 34.2 minutes per game this season, 1.37 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of nearly 33. Totally in the elite category for me in terms of fantasy points per minute and usage. Now we got to jump up here and look at the game totals and spreads, and these are looking very, very good in terms of fantasy potential tonight. Indiana, 116.25. They're a 2-point favorite against the Golden State Warriors. Warriors expected to score about 114.25 points themselves. So 2-point spread, definitely a green light go. The total is over 230. A big green light for me on that. So it's checking off all the boxes for me. I just don't see how, with this many points up on the board, with the spread being what it is, that Steph Curry goes under 51 fantasy points. I don't think 47.57 fantasy points is enough for him, especially given the fact that Indiana is giving up so many fantasy points per game to combo guards, and Steph Curry is, in fact, one of the best combo guards in the league. So I think this is a plus matchup and a great situation for Steph Curry here. I think that this 51 is definitely doable in terms of going over for me. So we'll move ahead to the next guy, which is Monte Sabonis, the highest projected Indiana Pacer on the board. He is set at 47 fantasy points, which seems like a whole lot of fantasy points to me for Sabonis, but maybe it's not quite enough. Let's take a look. On RotoGrinders, they've got him at 50.37, which would put him as a 3.37 over compared to PrizePicks and their projections. So big number on the board for Sabonis tonight. They're expecting a big game from him, is RotoGrinders. Now we'll go back to his fifth game here. He's been putting up some pretty strong games in his last five. 41.8 against Brooklyn. Not great, but still pretty good. Now this one was fantastic. 61.6 against Detroit. 43.1 against Atlanta. Dipped back down again. Then he jumped back up to 51.5. And then this huge one here, 80.4 against Minnesota. Now, for whatever reason, the Indiana Pacers haven't played since February 17th. This is now February 24th. I don't know if I'm seeing things, but that just doesn't seem right. How have they gotten such a long break? I don't know. Anyways, in his last 5 games, he's went over 50 fantasy points, 3 out of 5. So pretty good success rate there. As I mentioned, no previous game logs of Indiana versus Golden State to talk about, so we can jump ahead and discuss his minutes projection, where he is expected to play 36 minutes tonight. He is a versatile big. Now, Golden State, they rank just 6th well, I say just sixth. They're the sixth most giving, or have allowed the sixth most fantasy points per game to versatile bigs like Monte Sabonis. Now, the average isn't all that much, 34.7 fantasy points per game. So if you look at that and look at his projections, you're kind of like, well, if they're only allowing 34.7 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs, and Sabonis is projected at 50.37, man, maybe they'll limit him or hold him under that number of 50. And they might. I mean, they got a pretty good front court, and they're getting healthier with Draymond Green and Wiseman and Looney getting healthy. So we'll just have to see. Now, Sabonis, as I mentioned, has had plenty of rest here. Hopefully he comes out fresh and ready to go. Playing over 36 minutes per night. One of the better minutes per game averages 1.25 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of 25.63. So very good numbers there for a big man like Sabonis. So just to recap on this game, guys, this game gets a green light for me in both totals as it tops 230 combined points, and spread's going to be very close. It indicates that this game's going to stay competitive and that it should not be a blowout of any kind. So I feel very comfortable about taking pretty much anybody you want to take from either side of this game, and especially if you want to take the overs, whether it be fantasy points, real life points, rebounds, assists, your favorite single stat, you name it. I think a lot of this game makes a lot of sense to go over, and even first half formats if you want. So keep an eye on that one. That should be a very fun game and be full of fantasy production. Now, the next game we're going to talk about is the Boston Celtics as they take on the Atlanta Hawks. This game tips off at 7:40 p.m. and Jason Tatum's projection is on the rise, guys. It is on the way up. 47.5 fantasy points in this game. And, if you just think back maybe about a week ago, Jason Tatum was like 43, 44 points. So his projection is going up, and maybe for good reason. Tonight on Roto Grinders, they've got him at 49.52 fantasy points. 49.52 would put him a couple points over tonight's projection over on PrizePicks. So let's take a look at his game logs and see if 49 is warranted. All right, so I'm seeing some very good results here in his game logs. If we go back to his fifth game, which was against the Denver Nuggets, 39.2 points. Now, 54.2 against Atlanta would put him over tonight's projection, 49.6 over tonight's projection, 50.8 over tonight's projection, 46.2, very strong, but would not have put him over tonight's projection. So in his last 5, guys, he's went over 3 times out of his last 5 games. Now, he does have 2 games in recent memory against this Atlanta Hawks team, so we can look at both of those real quick. February 17th is when he put up 54.2 fantasy points, looking good. February 19th against Atlanta, he put up 49.6 fantasy points. So he had back-to-back games against the Hawks where he exceeded tonight's projection of 47.5 pretty easily, in my opinion. And I think this sets up very, very nice for Jason Tatum to do it again tonight. Now, his projection in terms of minutes are 38. He's a versatile forward. Now, we've already kind of talked about this matchup here. Fortunately for us, we had 2 game logs to look at it. Tatum versus this Hawks defense, and he scorched them both times. So not worried about the matchup here. The rest situation is a little worrisome for Tatum. Back-to-back, 3 games in 4 nights. He's playing 35.5 minutes per game, 1.25 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 30, which puts him in elite company for me. So liking what I'm seeing there. Now, we got to jump ahead here and talk game totals and spread, where the Atlanta Hawks are projected for 111.5 points, hosting Boston, who is the favorite here on the road, 113.5 points. You're talking about a 2-point spread here, guys. 2-point spread is a green light in my book. This game should stay close, should stay competitive. Not really worried about a blowout here. The game totals, pretty healthy, but fall short of that 230 or more combined point mark for me. But still a good situation here, and we've seen in the past that Jason Tatum can definitely do work against this Atlanta Hawks defense. So liking the over on Jason Tatum so far from what I am seeing. Now, the next man up is Trey Young, whose projections are also on the rise. Trey Young was just, maybe a week ago, 44, 43 fantasy points, and now he's up to 46.5 in this matchup here against the Boston Celtics. So let's take a look here. We should have plenty of game logs to look at when it comes to Trey Young. But first, we'll start things off with his fantasy projection on Roto Grinders, and they've got him projected at 45.4, which would put him under this 46.5 ever so slightly. So let's dig into the game logs and see what he's been up to. If we go back to his fifth game, which is against the Knicks, 37.6, not very good. But since that game against the Knicks, he has been on a heater. 53.6, 55.3, reaching 64.7 against Denver and 52.4 against Cleveland. So guys, I don't know about you, but this 46.5 is looking like light work for Trey Young recently. Now let's look at the two games here against Boston. February 17th against Boston. First game in a back-to-back against them, he put up 53.6 fantasy points. Love to see that. Gives me good hope that he can go over again tonight. Now, also in this second game against Boston of this back-to-back, 55.3 fantasy points. So guys, he's went over 50 two times in Boston, or against Boston, and that was recent here. You're talking just like about a week ago when he played them, less than a week ago. So with what I'm seeing here in terms of his last four games, going 53 or more, or 52 or more fantasy points in 4 straight games, and especially 2 of those games coming against Boston, it's all making a lot of sense for me that Trey Young can just go off here tonight. Now his minutes are set at 36. He's a combo guard. Boston allowing 46.45 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So take Trey Young out of the equation. Just combo guards in general, Boston's allowing 46.45 fantasy points. Now bring Trey Young's name back into the situation, and you're like, dang, this is Trey Young, one of the better young guards in the league. Really, the sky's the limit. So if you don't like Trey Young over, I want to know why. Why don't you like him over? Leave a comment down in the comments section below if you're not liking what you're seeing for Trey Young and how this is setting up for him. Now, the only thing that's probably working against ice Trey Young is the fact that this is a back-to-back 3 games and 4-night situation. Maybe fatigue catches up with him tonight, but man, I'm highly doubting it. I'm not betting on it. Playing almost 35 minutes per game, 1.3 fantasy points per minute, easy for me to say, and a usage rating of over 34.37, guys. So I think this game is lining up quite nicely for Trey Young to continue his hot streak. He's burned Boston in less than a week ago in back-to-back games, and he has just been on a complete tear, 52 or more fantasy points in his last 4 games. This is about as good of a pick as I can possibly come up with, so he's going to be one of my favorite plays tonight. Let's move on, though. We got another game to talk about here. We've got a depleted Houston Rockets team taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers. This game also tipping off at 7:40 p.m. And we're going to start things off with John Wall, who has kind of come down a little bit. I believe in the last game that he was on this PrizePicks board, he was set up at about 42 fantasy points. Well, he's back down to 40, and maybe 40 is that sweet spot where we can hit the over again on John Wall. His projection on Roto Grinders is 42.65, which would put him over by 2.65 fantasy points. So I'm liking the over so far on John Wall. Let's dig into the game logs real quick. All right, we head back to the 5th game in his game logs here against Miami, 32.7. Not even close to getting the job done on an over. 38.4 also would put him under. We've got a 50.1. Big time over, 44.1, big time over, and then 27.1 would put him way under. So he only played 26 minutes in his last game against the Chicago Bulls team. So as you can see in his last 5, if we look at him holistically here, he's went over just twice. Over 40 in just 2 times out of 5 games. So not liking his chances or his success rate of going over here. It looks like the under is going to be the way to go. Now, I don't see any recent games against Cleveland that we should talk about, so we can move ahead and talk minutes, where he's expected to play about 34 of them tonight. He is a combo guard. Now, here is one thing that stands out to me, and that is absolutely working in John Wall's favor. This Cleveland Cavaliers team ranks 10th most generous, 10th most giving against combo guards allowing 51.8 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So to call this a plus matchup might be a bit of an understatement, with no one really of note to help John Wall out here other than maybe Eric Gordon. It's going to fall on John Wall's shoulders. And the fact that the Cavaliers are allowing over 51 fantasy points per game, and that puts him almost 10 points over what he's projected to score tonight. Man, this is as good of a plus matchup as you're going to get anywhere. So liking the way this is setting up for Wall here, despite his inconsistencies of going over in his last 5 games. But 2 games in 3 night situation for Wall, playing almost 31 minutes per game, 1.15 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 31.45, putting him in elite company there. So loving the way those numbers look for him. We can move ahead and talk game totals and spread here. Little light on the game totals. Cleveland 107.75 versus Houston 111.25. So Houston's coming in as the road favorite here. Cleveland's not a very good team, and that's good news for the Houston Rockets, because I think what's been hurting John Wall more than anything is their inability to hang around with teams. They're just, getting blown out. They're not very good themselves. So the fact that they're facing a team that's maybe worse than them in the Cleveland Cavaliers is a good thing for John Wall. This game looks like it's going to stay mostly competitive. It looks like it's going to not be a blowout. I can't give it a green, but I'd probably give it a green to yellow in this case. I think this game does stay pretty close, as both teams just aren't very good, and that'll work out in their favor. So I do like a bounce back game here for John Wall. I think it's setting up nicely for him to be able to go over this 40, and that's probably the way that I'll go with him tonight. Now, a guy whose projections are definitely, absolutely on the rise, and for good reason, is Jarrett Allen, who sees his projections at 42 today. 42 is a big number for Jarrett Allen. I mean, that's like 5 points over what I remember playing him a few nights ago at like 37. But ever since Andre Drummond has been glued to the bench, Jarrett Allen has taken over here. So his projection on RotoGrinders is 42, which puts him right on the money here with PrizePicks. Now, if we dig into his game logs, take a look at Jarrett Allen's recent performances, you'll see why his projection is up the way that it is. When we were getting him at 36, 37 points, that was quite a bargain. Well, they've taken the bargain bin away from us. Now, going back to his 5th game here against the Clippers, 27.5 points. Then you have an over based on recent projections, which would put him over 39.3. That would be under tonight's projection, though. 43 would put him over tonight. 55.4 would put him over tonight. And 47.8 would put him over tonight. So back when he was like 36, 37 points, I mean, you could see what he was doing to that projection. Just smashing the over with great regularity. Consistent here. So they had to do what they had to do. PrizePicks did the right thing. They raised his projection to 42. And look, in his last 3 games, guys, he's still smashing 42. So don't lose hope in Jarrett Allen here. I still think that this is a good setup for him to potentially go over, especially with the Houston Rockets having really no inside presence, no one to match up with Jarrett Allen. Tonight, he's expected to play about 34 minutes. He's a post-up big. And we kind of have to throw these defensive rankings out the window here, because as I mentioned, no Christian Wood, no DeMarcus Cousins. I don't even know who this guy is that they're going to be marching out here to try and stop Jarrett Allen. But Jarrett Allen is playing incredible basketball. Whoever this NBA G Leaguer guy is, he's got no chance. Jarrett Allen should have a good game. Now, he is in a situation that's a little concerning, back-to-back, 3 games in 4 nights, but he's a young pup. I think he's got some spring in his step, some bounce in his legs. I think he should be fine. 27.2 minutes per game. 1.18 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 16.66. This fantasy points per minute number should be on the rise for Jarrett Allen based on the way that he has stepped into a much larger role for this Cleveland Cavs team. Now, to recap here, yeah, the game totals aren't the greatest. It's a little light. You're looking at about 218, 219 points combined between these two teams. Wish there was a little bit more, but hey, it'll do. But the spread is looking like one that's going to stay pretty close and competitive. I like the matchup for Jarrett Allen here. I don't think there's really anybody on the Houston Rockets going to cause him any problems. I think 42, although it is higher than 37 where he was projected just a few nights ago, is still within reach for Jarrett Allen as long as this game stays close. So I don't mind taking the over on Jarrett Allen, and you shouldn't either. So we can move down the line here and talk this next game, which is the Toronto Raptors versus the Miami Heat. Good matchup here in the Eastern Conference. So we'll start things off with the highest projected Raptor, and that's Pascal Siakam, who is at 40 fantasy points. So let's take a look at Siakam over on RotoGrinders and see where they've got him projected tonight. They got him at 40.64, so they're pretty much locked in, dialed in on Siakam here. Let's look at his game logs and see what he's been up to. Now, going back to his 5th game in the game log against this Milwaukee Bucks team, 48.6, 49.7, again against Milwaukee, 39.8, bit of a stinker there, would have put him under 44.4 and 50.7. So he's playing some fantastic basketball lately, guys. He is just destroying this 40 fantasy point marker, going over in 4 out of his last 5 games. So I don't know if 40 fantasy points is quite enough based on the recent games and the way that he's been playing here. Now, looking over his game log, I don't see any recent games against Miami, so we can jump ahead and talk his minutes. He's going to be playing about 37 minutes tonight, which is a big number for Pascal Siakam. And working in his favor is the fact that the Miami Heat front court has not been very strong against versatile forwards like Siakam. They are the second most generous, second most giving to versatile forwards, allowing 41.34 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. So now you factor in that this is Pascal Siakam we're talking about, one of the better versatile forwards in the league, and you can see that there's potential for Siakam to go over 40 once again in this matchup. Now, one thing that might put a dent in Pascal Siakam's projection is the fact that it's a back-to-back for him and his 3rd game in 4 nights. 36.3 minutes per game, 1.12 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 24.98, almost 25, but not quite. 25 or more puts him in very good status for me, so he's right on the cusp of very good usage numbers. So we'll jump ahead and we'll talk his game totals and spread. And this one's looking like one of those slower pace, defensive-minded type of matchups here where we may not get a ton of real-life points on the board. So Miami, the favorite by 3 points at home, 108.75. Toronto, 105.75. Just a 3-point spread, so I give the spread a green light. It looks like it's going to stay competitive. It's going to stay close, so not worried about anybody blowing out here. It's looking good according to our friends in Las Vegas who make all of the odds for these games. So feeling good about Pascal Siakam going over here based on everything that I'm seeing. But yeah, I do wish there were more points on the board as this one fails to even reach 220 combined points. So liking the over on Siakam. I'm liking it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And we'll talk about the next guy, which is going to be Bam Adebayo. We'll skip Jimmy Butler today and we'll talk Bam. They're both projected for 42. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, clicking the under the other night on Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo was very advantageous for us. So if you did that, congrats. You probably made a little bit of money, depending on who else was with Bam and Jimmy. But his projection tonight, 41.79. If we round that up, that's 42. So they're pretty much dialed in once again on Bam Adebayo. Let's see if we can find an edge here in the game logs and in the other stats that we're going to be looking at. Now, back on February 15th, his 5th game ago, 57.9. Huge number there for him. 43.5, 41.4, 44, and 41.4. So based on today's projection of 42, it's been a hard number for him to hit in his last 5, but he has done it in 3 out of 5 and has come really close in all 5. So there's a chance that he can do it. I just don't know here if there's enough points on the board and enough upside here for Mr. Bam Adebayo. Now his projected minutes are 35. He's a versatile big. This Toronto Raptors team does a pretty good job defending versatile bigs. They rank 22nd in terms of being most stingiest, I guess you could say, or least giving, being that their ranking is so strong. They're allowing almost 29 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. So Can't really call this a good matchup or plus matchup for Bam. Little leery here. 2 games in 3 nights for him, playing almost 34 minutes per game, 1.24 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 23.96. So good fantasy points per minute, good usage. Loving what I'm seeing for Bam Bam. So again, guys, I do wish that the game totals were a little higher in this one. I do wish that there was more points up on the board in general. I think it's going to be hard for Bam to hit this 42 or go over 42. So I'm probably leaning toward the under on Bam Adebayo. And to backtrack, Pascal Siakam, I do like the over on him. Now, let's move ahead to the next game as PrizePicks does what they do around this time and makes changes and adjustments during the video we shoot. That's okay. We're going to just talk about Karl Anthony Towns as this Minnesota Timberwolves team takes on the Chicago Bulls. Zach Levine, former Minnesota Timberwolf. Do you think he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder tonight? I don't know. Maybe he does. Karl Anthony Towns projected for 46. Let's take a look and see where they've got him on Roto Grinders. So Towns, as you can see, is the highest projected center on the board, 44.77. Now, 44.77 would put him under today's projection of 46. So let's take a look at his game logs and see what he's been up to. Yeah, we're just waiting. We're just waiting at this point. There we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We go back to his 5th game against the Lakers. 29.2, not good whatsoever. 53.5, way better. 41.6, decent. 60, hit a 60 burger. His first time going 60 or more since returning to this Minnesota T-Wolves lineup. And then 52.1 against the Milwaukee Bucks. So in his last 5 games, he's went over 3 times out of 5. Pretty decent success rate there. No prior game log against the Chicago Bulls, so we can move ahead here, where his minutes are set at 33. He is a versatile big. Now, I'll tell you this Chicago Bulls front court is not very good. Yes, Wendell Carter's back, and he's playing bigger minutes, but he's a little undersized and a little too smallish for me, I think, against Karl Anthony Towns. I think that this is a good matchup for Karl Anthony Towns. The Chicago Bulls rank just 8th in the league in terms of how many fantasy points per game they allow. So that's a good number, a good rating. They're allowing 34.32 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs like Towns. Now, this is a back-to-back and 3 games in 4 night situation, so maybe fatigue starts to creep in a little bit. 32.9 minutes per game for him, 1.42 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 26.59. So jumping ahead to the totals here, this game, 115.5 for Chicago, Minnesota, 111.5, 4-point spread, should stay close, should stay competitive. I give it a green light. Little tinge of yellow in there, but mostly green. I think this game does stay close. Chicago and Minnesota probably pretty evenly matched, if you ask me. Now, the game total, 226.7 points. Pretty good, too. So I don't mind taking anybody that you're feeling good about an over on in this game. I don't think it blows out, and I think there is some upside here based on the game total and the spread. So liking the way this one's shaping up for Karl Anthony Towns, I think there's a good chance that he can go over. Next guy we're going to talk about is Zach Levine. He is the highest projected Chicago Bull on today's board. He's at 45 fantasy points as of the shooting of this video. So, as I mentioned, this is a rematch of sorts for Zach Levine, as he was a Minnesota Timberwolf at one point in time. 45.94 fantasy points for Zach Levine, which would put him just a little over this 45 number. So if we look here at his game logs, see what Zach Levine's been up to. He's averaging over 28 real-life points per game. Pretty impressive. So going 5 games back, 41.3 fantasy points would put him under. 54.5 would put him over. 48.5 over. 53.3 over. So very good little stretch of games there, but then he kind of came back down to earth against Houston, which was a matchup that I think all of us thought Zach Levine could absolutely feast, but he didn't for whatever reason. He played just 31.8 minutes that game. He had a total team effort, we'll say. Kobe White stepped up in that game. Wendell Carter Jr. stepped up a big way in that game. So Zach Levine just didn't have to do as much as he typically does. So looking back here, no previous games to talk about against this Minnesota Timberwolves team. So we'll jump ahead and talk about his minutes, where they're set at 36. Now, he is a scoring wing. Minnesota, although they rank very good, or they're very friendly in terms of how many fantasy points per game they're allowing to scoring wings, the average is just 28.04. So either they're not like facing very good scoring wings, or the ones that they have faced, they just aren't averaging a ton of points. So somehow they're ranked really favorably, but the fantasy points per game doesn't correlate. So I don't know, kind of a weird one there. Can't get a read on it. 2 games in 3 nights for Levine. He's playing over 35 minutes per game. 1.23 fantasy points per minute and a usage rating of 30.95. He's in elite status there with that usage rating. So talking recap here on the game totals and spread. Yeah, the totals are pretty good. Not great, but good. Spread is a green light for me. Maybe a little bit of yellow in there, maybe a little bit. But I think these two teams, they match up pretty well. I think that this is a situation where the game does pretty much stay competitive throughout. Not concerned about blowout whatsoever here. So let's see if we can reload the PrizePicks page, as they probably have done some updating on the back end to some of these projections, as they typically do during our lovely PrizePicks video. There we go. We're back. We're back on track. Let's head to NBA. Scroll back down the list. All right, and then we could get into the next game, which is the Detroit Pistons versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, we're going to start things off with the highest projected Piston, and that's Jeremy Grant, who's projected at 37. So let's take a look here at Jeremy Grant. Where is he at? Power forward. Yep, there he is. So they got him at 37 on PrizePicks, and they have him at 37.48 on RotoGrinders. So as you can see, man, these two sites have been kind of locked in, dialed in pretty good here on a lot of these guys. So let's see if we can find an edge in the game logs maybe. Now, if we go back 5 games here, 28.4 against the New Orleans Pelicans, 45.4 against Chicago. Very good game there. Then he dips back down to 27.9, 34, 35.4. So, guys, it's been very difficult for Jeremy Grant to hit what his recent projections were, which were like 40. So I think this 37 number makes things a little more difficult for us in terms of decision making. But even so, if we keep that 37 figure in mind and look at his last 5 games, well, he's went under 37 in 4 out of 5. So he has failed to go over in his last 5 games in 4 out of 5. He's went over just once, 45.4 against Chicago. Looking back here, he does have a game log against New Orleans, which was February 14th, Valentine's Day. He played nearly 38 minutes that game. Now, he shot the ball 15 times, but only made 4 of them. 27%, not very good. And he ended up with 28.4 fantasy points. So something to keep in mind, some interesting little game log action there for Jeremy Grant. Now tonight he's expected to play 35 minutes. He's a versatile forward. This Pelicans team, not too difficult against versatile forwards. They've given up almost 32 fantasy points per game on average this season. Jeremy Grant is playing a back-to-back and a 3 games in 4 nights situation for him. Over 36 minutes per game played this season, 1.05 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 25.51. So fantasy points per minute, a little light for me, but it does hit kind of that gold standard of 1 or more fantasy points per minute. So I like to see that out of Jeremy Grant. Now moving ahead here, the New Orleans Pelicans, 115.75 are pretty big home favorites against this Detroit Pistons team. Detroit expected to score 106.25. So Definitely cannot give this a green or a yellow. I put this one more in the red category. So I'm going to call this our first red alert, red warning, blowout alert. So this is almost a 10-point spread, guys. Got to be very, very careful in this game with taking overs on anyone. And I think that just based on what I'm seeing out of Jeremy Grant recently, I think the under is the play here for Jeremy Grant. I'm moving ahead to the other side of this game. We've got Zion Williamson. Some of you call him Xanos. That's Zion mixed with Thanos, and for good reason. This dude's been playing fantastic basketball lately. If you look at his projection today, he's at 41.89. So even if we were feeling generous and we rounded it up to 42, well, that would still put him under the mark of 43 on the PrizePicks board right now. So if we look at his last 5 games, we start back here at February 14th, which puts him at 45.1. That would be good enough for an over. 51, over. 54, over. Had a bit of a stinker here, 30 against this Phoenix Suns team. And then 46, he pops back up for another over. So he's went over in 4 out of his last 5 games. Now, that game against the Detroit Pistons on February 14th, he played over 35 minutes, shot the ball 20 times, converting on 10 of those attempts. Ended up with 45.1 fantasy points. So I'm liking the way that things are shaping up for Zion in this 43. 45, of course, would be more than 43. So the over would be in play there in his last matchup versus Detroit. Now his minutes tonight, 34. He's a versatile forward. Detroit giving up 26.30 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. And according to the rankings here, they are one of the toughest teams and least generous teams to versatile forwards. Good news for Zion is that he is going to be well rested here. He should be pretty fresh, playing 32.8 minutes per game on the season, 1.24 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 27.5. So yes, there is absolutely blowout potential, blowout risk here, but I think Zion Williamson sets up for a nice first half play. If I'm not mistaken, he has been crushing first half overs lately, and I think this is another situation where he can do more of the same. So that's how I'm feeling about Zion Williamson. Maybe not playing him in full game, but first half definitely in play. Now here is a sight for sore eyes. The San Antonio Spurs are on the PrizePicks board. Boy, it seems like it's been forever since we discussed some San Antonio Spurs basketball players, but we're going to do things the right way here by talking DeJounte Murray, who is projected at 42. And all right, I don't see DeMar DeRozan up here. I don't think he's going to play, but man, 42 for Murray? Really? I don't know, man. I don't know. Seems high for me, but let's go find him here on Roto Grinders and see where they've got DeJounte Murray tonight. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to DeJounte Murray, because they've got him at 45.21, which puts him over 3 points higher than PrizePicks. Let's dig into this guy's game logs. All right, we're going back in time here to 5 games ago. 24.1 against Houston. Not good at all. And he played 32 minutes, so it wasn't due to a lack of minutes. But then you see this big monster game here in a first half of a back-to-back against the Golden State Warriors. He put up 65 points. But then what on earth happened to him here? He falls all the way down from 65 to 12.8. Not good whatsoever. And then this game following that one, 33.7. Not good at all. His minutes were down in both of those games, so I'll give him that, 26 minutes, 24 minutes. Then he pops back up, playing 32 minutes and putting up 55.4 fantasy points against the Charlotte Hornets. Now, going back here, I don't see any games against this Oklahoma City Thunder team, but, you're talking about a model of inconsistency here. That's DeJounte Murray in a nutshell. And his projections tonight are set up for 36 minutes. He is a combo guard. Here is what's standing out to me and working in his favor. The Oklahoma City Thunder are allowing over 50.5 fantasy points per game to combo guards like DeJounte Murray. So there's upside here. There is plenty of wiggle room for Murray to go over his projection on PrizePicks of 42. So I think PrizePicks might be a little underweight on his projection here. You got 45.21 on Roto Grinders, and you got the fact that, man, OKC is just bleeding points to combo guards, 50.5 points. He's going to be well rested, hasn't played basketball in a little while. 30.4 minutes per game, 1.14 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 23.84. Now, both of those numbers should be on the rise because there's no DeMar DeRozan in the lineup, according to what I'm seeing here. So, could be in line for a big game. So, if we jump ahead and look at game totals and spread, we got Oklahoma City, 109.25. They're a 1-point home favorite against this Spurs team, who are set up at 108.25. So just a 1-point spread. That gives a green light for me. Not a ton of total points here, though, between these two teams. You're looking at about 217.5 points. So I do wish the totals were a bit healthier. Normally, when there's higher totals, you get more fantasy point production. You get more real-life points, more assists, more rebounds. As the shots are flying, there's more opportunities for shots to go in, more opportunities for shots to go out, which means more rebounds. And if the shots are falling, well, then the assists should be up too. So everything just kind of correlates together. But yeah, just in a nutshell, I do wish the totals were higher, but the spread is A-OK by me. Next guy we're going to talk about is SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You know, tomato, you call him what you want to call him. I'm going to call him a potentially good play tonight. Now, he fell short in the last game against the Miami Heat. I like the over on SGA there. Unfortunately, he went under, which cost me a big payout. That would have been $1,000 night. But that's okay. That's okay. We're back again. We're gonna figure him out tonight. 41.14 would put him over if we look at his last 5 games going back here against the Lakers, 51.4. Then he had a 4-game layoff. Returning to the lineup, it was a little shaky, 33.6, 27.3. But in his last 2, seems like he's getting it back together here, 49.3 and a 39.9. So looking pretty good. But in all here, in his last 5 games, he's went over 40 just twice, 51.4 at 49.3. Now, against this Spurs team, I don't have a game log to look at, so we can move ahead and talk minutes. 35 minutes. He is a combo guard. Here's what's really jumping off of the page for me for SGA. The Spurs are allowing 57.9 fantasy points per game to combo guards like SGA. So, fantastic upside here. They are one of the most giving teams in the entire league to combo guards. I think this is a great spot for SGA to bounce back and potentially go over his 40 fantasy points on the board. Now, fatigue, maybe a little bit, okay? This is a 3 games and 4 night situation for him. He's playing almost 34 minutes per game, 1.18 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 27.64. So just to recap, guys, yes, I wish the totals were higher, but they're still okay by me. The spread is fantastic, just a 1-point spread, so that's a green light for me, 2 thumbs up, whatever you want to say. And the way that this matchup is looking for SGA is looking like one where there's plenty of a ceiling here for him to go over his projection of 40 on PrizePicks. So as soon as I'm done with this video, guess what? I'm going to go lock some of these dudes in, especially SGA. I like the way things are setting up for him. So we can move ahead here. We're almost done. Thanks for hanging with me. The Charlotte Hornets are taking on the Phoenix Suns tonight. We got a number of different Hornets on the board. LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, who might not play tonight, but we're going to stop right here and talk LaMelo Ball and see if Mr. Melo can figure things out and maybe go over. So his projection's at 40.65, which would put him over by well over a point. Let's dive into some game logs and see what Ball has been up to. I don't know if he's been balling or if he has been a baller or maybe he's been ball-less. We'll find out now. His five game total's looking pretty good here. His 5-game log, 35.9 against Memphis, 44.2 against Minnesota, 50.4 against San Antonio, 25.1 against Golden State, and 41.4 against Utah. So in his last 5 games, he has went over tonight's projection 3 out of 5. So pretty good success rate. Now, looking back here, no games versus Phoenix in any of his recent last 10 to 12 games, not seeing anything there. So minutes 36 tonight is where he is projected to play. He is a distributor or a pass first point guard. Now, Phoenix, they allow just 15.84 fantasy points per game. So not looking very good on paper for Ball in terms of any kind of upside or plus matchup. This is a 2 games and 3 night situation in terms of rest. He's playing 28.2 minutes per game, 1.22 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 26.13. So pretty productive guy when he's out there. And those numbers will go up even higher if Gordon Hayward sits and if Devontae Graham continues to be sidelined. So liking that. Now we can move ahead and talk game totals and spread, and this is a red for me in terms of spread. So this is a blowout warning, blowout alert. This is a 10-point spread. Phoenix 117.75, Charlotte 107.75. Not looking so good here in terms of spread. I do have my concerns about taking anybody from this game and taking them over. So be very, very careful. If you're going to take anyone like a LaMelo Ball over, maybe just do it in the first half. But I can't tell you to play this game in a full game format, as it just looks like it's going to get out of hand, and I think Phoenix is a much better team. So let's talk about this next brother, which is Devin Booker. He's projected at 38 fantasy points. Book, someone we haven't talked a ton about here, but we're going to do it right here, right now. And I was just listening to Sicko Mode yesterday. Shout out to Drake, shout out to Travis Scott, and shout out to Wet Like Book. Is he going to be wet tonight? I don't know. Let's find out. 37.75 fantasy points puts him slightly under this number of 38. Let's dig into the recent game logs for Devin Booker, who LeBron James has said is one of the most disrespected, I think was the words he used, players in the NBA. If we go back to 5 games, he played Orlando, ended up with 40.8 fantasy points. 35.9 against Brooklyn, way under. 29.8, way under. 33.5 under, and 43.8. So he's been a hard nut to crack, we'll say. Hard guy to figure out in his last 5 games, just going over twice in his last 5. Now, looking back here, I don't see any recent games against Charlotte. So we're going to jump ahead and talk about his minutes, where he's going to be playing 34 minutes according to Roto Grinders. He is a scoring wing. We know that. We know this guy can score with the best of them. His fantasy points per game, or their fantasy points per game allowed, the Hornets are allowing just 23.47 fantasy points per game. So on paper, this doesn't look like a very advantageous matchup. Doesn't look like there's a ton of upside here for Booker. 2 games and 3 nights for him, 34.5 minutes per game. 1.03 fantasy points per minute, just barely squeaking by that 1 fantasy point per minute number that we look for. And then 29.18 usage rating, almost in that elite category. So, guys, just to recap, I don't feel good about taking Devin Booker over here just due to the big spread on the board. It looks like it's going to be a blowout. And if you just think about this, if you put all the numbers aside for a minute and you just think, okay, Phoenix Suns versus the Charlotte Hornets, who's the better basketball team? Who has the most talent? Well, you're picking Phoenix, right? I mean, Phoenix should just come out and absolutely dominate and crush this Hornets team, especially if there's no Gordon Hayward. So, yeah, avoiding that in full game formats is the way to go for me. Now, finally, we've reached the end of the video. We're pushing another hour-long video. Guys, when I first started doing these, I wasn't giving you as much information, as much value as I am now. And I know some of you, these videos are long, but if you hit the playback speed button and turn it up to 1.5, you get through them so much quicker, and you still get all of the valuable information that I'm spitting here. So next game and the final game is the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Utah Jazz. LeBron James projected for 52. I think they've brought his projections down just slightly. They were up at like 58 or something, just totally off the wall. Well, it's been hard for LeBron to even hit 50 in a lot of his games recently, but tonight, Roto Grinders actually likes him to go over his projection of 52 by about 4 points. So that's a huge delta, a huge gap in between PrizePicks and Roto Grinders. So let's dig into the game logs and see what the King has been doing. So if we go back 5 games here, back on Valentine's Day against Denver, 49.5, that would put him under. 54.1 would put him barely over, 2.1 points over. 49.1 would put him under, 44.3 would put him under, and 56.3 would put him over by quite a bit. So he's gone over in just 2 of his last 5 games. 52 has been a mark that has been hard for him to hit in a lot of these games. Now, part of the reason that he went over in his last game was the fact that it went into overtime. And so he ended up getting big time minutes, 43.25 minutes in that game. So looking back here, I don't see any games against Utah, so we can move ahead and talk minutes. 37 minutes. He is a versatile forward. This Utah Jazz team is allowing 34.11 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. But of course, this is no generic, great value brand, no name, versatile forward we're talking about here. This is LeBron James. LeBron James. This is a situation where I'm not worried about matchups. He is so good that he can overcome any matchup. 2 games and 3 nights for LeBron, playing 35 minutes per game, 1.38 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 32. Fantastic fantasy performer. Now, what's worrying me about this game is the spread here. So Utah 113.5. They are a 8.5 point favorite at home against this Lakers team. Lakers expected to score just 105 points, which is the lowest total of any team on today's slate of games. Kind of depressing. Poor LeBron James. I'm sure he's missing Anthony Davis right about now. But anyways, guys, I don't feel very good about LeBron James in this situation with the spread being what it is. This, it's one of them games where I'm going to have to put it in the red zone. I think this game could blow out unless LeBron decides he's just going to be great and be special like, he tends to do every once in a while. It's hard for me to go under on LeBron James, but looking at all the numbers, it's also hard for me to take the over. So maybe we just don't touch this guy with a 10-foot pole and we fade the situation. If we don't feel good about it, we can walk away. There's plenty of other good plays that I've discussed in today's video. Now, finally, before this PrizePicks website crashes on me and kicks me out, let's talk Rudy Gobert real quick. The big man for the Utah Jazz is projected at 38 fantasy points. They like him to go over his projection of 39.89 on Roto Grinder. So let's dig into his game logs. All right, back here in his 5th game, which was February 13th against Miami, 37.4 would have been under, 32.8 would have been well under. But then he bounces back here, 54.5, a big over. 33.5 would have been under again, and 39.9 would have put him over. So in his last 5 games, 2 times out of 5, he has went over tonight's projection. No recent games against the Lakers, so we can move ahead and talk about his minutes and get you guys out of here. He's expected to play 31 fantasy points, or 31 minutes, not fantasy points, 31 minutes tonight. He's a post-up big. The Lakers limiting post-up big guys like Rudy Gobert to just 24.53 fantasy points per game. Not looking like a very positive plus matchup. Not a lot of ceiling here for Rudy Gobert. 2 games and 3 nights for him, playing over 30 minutes per game. 1.31 fantasy points per minute to go along with a usage rating of 17.05. So very good fantasy point per minute producer. The usage rating is okay. Now, the reason I say it's okay, you would look at that usage rating for anybody else and say, man, that's awfully low. But for post-up big, I explained this in the past, they're just not touching the basketball like some of these other guys. So, they're not going to be handling the ball or anything. Normally, they're going to be making their living blocking shots, rebounding offensively and defensively, getting easy putbacks, getting lobs and stuff like that. That's really the only time they're going to touch the ball. The occasional steal and assist, okay, sure. So for a usage rating on a post-up big like Gobert to be 17.05 is completely fine and normal. No issue with that. So just to recap this game, guys, Utah looking like pretty big home favorites here against this Lakers team. This spread is one that I have to put in the red. Probably not a game that I'm going to be targeting very many people from. It's probably one where it's just best to avoid it and not play anybody from this game. I'm just not digging it, not feeling it. I think there's way better spots, way better places that you can look to take some overs and unders on some guys tonight. But you guys let me know what you think about some of the guys I talked about in today's video. Is there anybody that stands out to you? Is there somebody that you're not going to touch with a 10-foot pole like I talked about? Well, leave their name down in the comments section below. Once again, guys, I appreciate all your support. This is CJ for Out of Bounds DFS. Good luck tonight. Let's win some money. And until the next video, peace.